I really don't want to do this post-game video, guys. Probably the most frustrating game we've seen so far this season. I mean, sure, it was an exciting game because there were a lot of lead changes, a lot of back and forth between both teams, went on runs at various points in the game. And don't get me wrong, there is blame on the Bulls for not closing this one out. But come on now. Even non-Bulls fans would admit that this game was very poorly officiated. And I'm saying that politely. You don't even need to have to actually watch the game to say, hey, something isn't right here when you just look at the box score and see the Bulls shot 18 total free throws compared to the Pelicans 36. Yes, there were some bad fouls on the Bulls that actually should have been called. I'm not saying that any fouls called on the Bulls weren't justified, but how is it that you have that big of a disparity in free throw shooting? What's more annoying, actually, is that you never see Billy Donovan challenging anything, or when he does, it's not at the right time and it proves to be unsuccessful, but we'll save that topic for a different day. But what's more asinine than anything, and it doesn't just apply to this game, really, it's any time you have blatantly bad calls in the final 2 minutes of the game that determine the outcome. And I don't have to keep reminding everyone how much every game is so important this season, especially trying to get wins before you get Lonzo back so you can position yourself well for the playoffs. Some really bad calls or no calls in this game, right? Brandon Ingram pushes off on Alex Caruso, which gave him enough separation on his step back jumper, which he hit to put the Pelicans up by 1 with around a minute to go. The foul on DeRozan when he was driving to the basket to take the lead with less than a minute to go. Hand check by Valanciunas, refs choke on the whistle. The body contact after the hand check, I believe it was either Zion or it was Jones, refs choke on the whistle yet again, leads to a transition play for the Pelicans where they get called for a foul and sent to the line. The 3 by Brandon Ingram, in which Javonte Green was called for a foul, which gave Ingram 3 free throws. When you actually see the review, it's abundantly clear that Ingram kicked his leg out to draw contact. That's a foul on Ingram, not on Javonte. And then finally, one of the last plays of the game, Bulls are down 3, I believe it was, 11 seconds left. Pelicans inbound the play. The Bulls are obviously looking for the steal or a tie-up to get the ball back. They clearly tie it up. It was actually between both Joneses on both teams. And what do the refs do? They call a foul, send the Pelicans to the free throw line, and that all but seals it. Lavine obviously quickly scores a 2 right after, but by that time it's too late, not enough time on the clock to try and foul and hope that they miss both, and then chuck it from a full court shot to tie the game because the Bulls had 0 timeouts by that point. I think I might have said this before at some point last season, but now that they do the last 2-minute report, which is always just frustrating as a fan when the report comes out after the fact and you realize that it was the wrong call, which could have determined the difference in the game being a win or a loss. But now that they do these reports and there are plays that can be reviewed, the refs need to be held more accountable when they make blatant mistakes like this. It's one thing to miss a call here and there. That's going to happen. It's another to miss several calls, especially calls late in game. It's frustrating for the fans, it's frustrating for the players, and it doesn't make the game enjoyable to watch when the refs are absolutely incompetent. It's bad for the league. You can't have refs deciding the games like this down the stretch. That being said, officiating rant aside, the Bulls also didn't do themselves any favors. Yes, some of the blame should be on the Bulls, like the refs didn't make DeMar bounce the ball off of his foot or leg or whatever it was on a drawn up play out of a timeout when the Bulls were down 3 with 17 seconds left. Like, that's a pretty bad unforced turnover on DeMar's part. The Bulls also shot horribly from 3 tonight, as has been the case this season. 17 for 27 from deep. Lavine alone was 3 for 12 from 3, which leads me to my next point. Poor shot selection from Lavine down the stretch, and he was fortunate enough to be bailed out a little with Vucevic actually hitting some threes after he missed. And then the Bulls were just really bad on the glass tonight, getting out rebounded 50-35, giving up 13 offensive rebounds to the Pelicans. And this is with Drummond back in the lineup, which is great that he was back, by the way, even if it was for limited minutes. So yeah, the Bulls probably shouldn't have found themselves in a situation where they had a game that was so close that they had to deal with bad calls from the refs down the stretch. But either way, screw the officials. What I will say though is that both of these teams really are better than their records show. The Pelicans, most of their losses have actually come in overtime. Bulls have lost a lot of close games. Bulls are actually one of the worst teams in the league in clutch situations, 29th in the league in scoring in clutch moments, which that's a problem in and of itself. But the reason I bring this up is because the Pelicans, they're a good team. And the Bulls competed and brought this thing to the wire even when the calls weren't going their way. And I think there is something to be said about maintaining your competitiveness against the better teams in the league, which is not something the Bulls did last season. Now, as far as how some of these guys showed up in this one, I'll start with DeMar, because even though, yes, DeMar had a great outing now that he was freed from the Raptors' insane double-team defenses, he broke out and scored 33 points on 14 for 26 shooting, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. All of that was great. But I was actually finding myself getting frustrated with DeMar in slowing down the pace of the game and drawing up isolation plays where guys were just standing around and waiting for him to make a move the ball around, get guys involved. What happened to the idea of the offense being more random like they were talking about in training camp? This is the same offensive scheme that we saw from DeMar last year. I appreciate the fact that DeMar can get you a bucket in a hurry when you need it, but when the team is rolling in transition and guys are getting up and down the court and then you stop the pace and draw up a play in the half court, yeah, that kind of stuff needs to be looked at further from the coaching standpoint. Zach Lavine, talked about him, scored 23 points, but not on good efficiency. He was cold from 3, missed a lot of shots, 9 for 22 overall, 3 for 12 from 3. Would like to see Zach starting to defer more or making plays for others when it's clear his 3-point shots just aren't going down. Make plays for others, drive to the basket. Ayo and Pat in the starting lineup, but they actually didn't close out the game. Billy went with the vets in Caruso and Dragic. Both Ayo and Pat had decent games, not as impactful on offense, but where they did play well was in regards to their defense. Ayo was great on CJ McCollum tonight. McCollum was ice cold, 3 for 13, 0 for 5 from deep. He just could not get it going, and both him and Caruso were really hounding him the whole night, which is what you want to see when you go up against someone like McCollum, who is as gifted as a scorer as he is. And then for Patrick, I know he wasn't on Zion all night, but when he was on Zion, dude held his own and really limited him from getting easy buckets. Zion woke up in the fourth quarter in part because Pat wasn't in there to close out the game, but Zion was pretty quiet for most of the night as their #1 scoring option. Pat also did have 4 blocks tonight, which was great to see. And then Vucevic was pretty quiet most of the night. Valanciunas was kind of having his way with him, especially in boxing out for rebounds, but Vucevic did come through in the clutch, hitting those 2 big threes late in the fourth. Just wasn't enough for the Bulls for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier. Vuce finished the game with 18 points on 6 for 9 shooting and 7 rebounds. I need to see Vucevic putting up more shot attempts. Another reason why I would like to see DeMar and Zach defer a little more when Vuce is actually efficient from the field. And then finally, Dragic, man. The guy continues to impress, playing like he's in his 20s. He was that much needed spark off the bench for the Bulls, and oh man, how about that insane lob to Derrick Jones Jr. where he just threaded the defense to get it up there. It's his scoring and playmaking in that second unit that has just been phenomenal. He finished tonight the game with 14 points and 6 assists, was also a plus 10 on the night in 25 minutes of play. But yeah, all in all, a frustrating game, although I find myself calming down a bit now that I got that rant out. Thank God the Bulls are finally going to be on a long break before their next game, where they will be taking on the Nuggets on Sunday, also at home, so some needed rest, no travel. Hopefully that re-energizes the Bulls a bit, as pretty soon they are going to be heading on a long road trip before Thanksgiving. I'll have my hot takes video out tomorrow. It's been a while since I've done one of those, so be on the lookout for that. And as always, guys, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.